Hey guys, it's Joy. So I just got back from taking some of my foster pets to the vet, so I figured I'd make a video about pet culture here in Korea and what it's like to own pets here. Everything in this video is my experience. Other people might have different experiences, and what I say is just general. It's not like I'm not saying every Korean's like this, but I did want to put that disclaimer. So first off, talking about pet culture here in Korea. There's not really much of a pet culture out here. Like, people aren't really into animals, owning animals as pets out here. Some people do have pets, but it's a very small minority. And usually when people do have pets, they tend to get this, they go to the pet shop and get the small little like Malteses or Shih Tzus or whatnot. Some people do have bigger dogs, but unfortunately every big dog I've seen is generally outside on like a 4-foot chain, 4 or 5 foot chain, and they generally stay out there 24/7, and I never see people walking them or giving them attention, but just by themselves. I've heard that people get them for protection or security, but I really don't know why they would need that here in Korea, because Korea is one of the safest countries in the world. People don't generally do bad things, you know, in general. So I really don't think people need these dogs as protection. Coconut, stop. Sorry, my dog Coconut's trying to get my cat. I have a little kitten that I'm fostering, and my dog's trying to play with her, and it's upsetting the kitten. But anyways, so yeah, it's really sad. I feel really bad for these big dogs. Sometimes it's even little dogs that are chained outside. But I feel really bad seeing these dogs. Like, they just look sad and they don't get any attention. Yeah. And I don't know if it's because they don't really get much attention or if they're treated bad, but a lot of the dogs I've met out here, seen, are not very friendly. Like, in the United States, I could go up to pretty much any dog and pet it, and I've never really had an issue or a problem. But I would say like 90% of the dogs that I try to pet out here in Korea try to bite me. Like, they're not very friendly, and they're not friendly towards my dogs. Like, sometimes if I'm walking my dogs, if there's like a little dog out loose that's like gotten loose from their yard or whatever, they chase after my dogs and try to bite them. Like, they're really aggressive. I've even had to like pull like a dog off my dog that was like biting my dog. So, yeah, I don't know, the dogs aren't very friendly out here. But yeah, and also, it's like for the little dogs, once again, this is not everyone, but sometimes people get these small little puppies from the pet shop. They're all cute and tiny, but once the dog gets bigger, they don't look as cute anymore, or maybe the person realizes they're too much work because, you know, they're puppies, so they haven't been trained yet, or maybe the puppies are chewing on everything. They end up getting rid of them. And like, whenever I ask my students, like, does anyone have any pets? Like, usually they never raise their hand. Like, I've maybe had like 7 students raise their hand saying they have pets. And I have one friend who asked the same question in their class, and one of their students raised their hand and said, you know, they had a dog, they had a puppy, but their family doesn't have the puppy anymore. So my friend asked, well, why don't you have the puppy anymore? And the student responded with, well, the puppy grew up and it wasn't cute anymore, so we got rid of it, but we're gonna get a new puppy soon. Yeah, like, I've heard that can be common out here, that people do that. Like, I volunteer at the Akdong Animal Shelter, the animal shelter in the town that I live in, and it's guesstimated that there's like about 250 to 300 dogs at the shelter. Unfortunately, adopting pets isn't really a thing out here. Occasionally people do adopt pets from the shelter, but it's not very common. Oh, hi, Pumpkin. So unfortunately, like, these people, they get these little tiny cute dogs from the pet shop, and once they're too big, they dump them at the shelter, and usually the dogs live in the shelter the rest of their life. It's really sad. Luckily here in Akdong, our shelter is a no-kill. They don't euthanize animals unless they're like really sick and need to be euthanized. But, you know, some of the other cities, they just have too many dogs and can't do that. So unfortunately, some of the other cities, the dogs do get euthanized if they're, you know, at the shelter too long. And a lot of the dogs at the shelter are purebred dogs too, like they're Shih Tzus and, you know, the miniature poodles and stuff. So very nice, good dogs, you know, lovable. So it's just really sad that they just get stuck at the shelter and no one comes to adopt them. And it's really sad because there's just so many dogs. Like, the Akdong shelter is pretty much run by one woman. She does have a guy that helps her out with maintenance stuff. But as far as, like, taking care of the dogs on a day-to-day basis, it's pretty much just the one lady. Sometimes she does have volunteers, like us foreigners go and volunteer sometimes, but, you know, it's not very consistent. So it's just sad that these, like, 300 dogs don't get any attention. The bigger dogs, like all dogs out here in Korea, big dogs in Korea, are chained up. They have like tiny little dog houses, but for the most part they're out and like just out with no protection from the rain or, you know, the wind or the sun. So it's really sad, and like half the dogs at the shelter have mange, which is kind of expensive to treat. So yeah, it's just a really sad sight, and like they're finally just now getting a real building to like house some of the dogs, but like shelters out here aren't as regulated. They don't have as much government funding like shelters in the States, and they don't get as much, you know, donations. They don't get donations like they do in the States. So up until recently, all the dogs at the shelter were just like running around. Yeah, they just like falling apart little enclosures, and it's just a really bad situation. And I think that's common with a lot of shelters out here in Korea. Like, they're just kind of like backyard shelters, and it's really sad. I forgot what I was gonna say. But yeah, it's really sad. No, Coconut, leave the kitten alone. Coconut's trying to get the kitten again. So yeah, and that's one reason why I have so many foster pets right now, because there's just so many animals out here that need homes, and it's really sad, and it's hard to say no to these animals. Hi, Pumpkin. Yeah, and yeah, when I first started walking my dogs, my neighbors used to, as far as owning pets here in Korea, like, my neighbors would, like, see me, and as soon as they see my dogs aren't even doing anything, they would yell at me in Korean saying, "Don't let your dogs poop! Don't let your dogs poop!" Like, they just thought I was gonna just let my dogs poop all over the place. But it's funny because I'm, like, really the only person that actually cleans up after my dogs. A lot of times I see little dogs that are running around loose and they poop everywhere, you know, no one's cleaning up after them. But luckily now, like, my neighbors have kind of stopped yelling at me now that they know that I pick up after my dogs. But for the first, like, 6 months that I lived here, like, people were like, the older people were yelling at me, like, "Don't let your dogs poop." I feel like I was throwing away my little bag of, you know, doggy stuff in the trash, and this one guy said, "Oh, you're not allowed to throw that away." And I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do with it? And he's like, "You're supposed to bury it." I'm like, okay. So yeah, it's just really weird. And, you know, a lot of people are afraid of my dogs. I have like one Maltese, like my foster dog is a Maltese. And then my dog Coconut, she's only like 35 pounds, but she's kind of tall and long, even though she doesn't weigh much. People are scared of her. Not everyone, honestly, but I have had people kind of yelp when they see her, or like if I'm walking down the street, like they'll move to the other side of the street to like avoid her. It's a funny story. Once I was crossing the street, and there was an old lady next to me, but excuse me. But like we were kind of walking in different directions. So she's going this way and I'm going this way, and my dogs aren't even paying attention to her. They're just like looking ahead, you know, at something in the distance. But as soon as she kind of turns around and notices them, she starts running as fast as she can. And she ends up dropping her bag of ramen. Coconut, shh. Coconut, shh. And then, like, some old guy that was next to her, like, yelled at me as if it was my fault that she dropped her bag of ramen. Like, my dogs are, like, weren't even doing anything. They were on a leash, being 100% well-behaved. You know, she's the one that decided to spaz out. So, yeah. So, that's just kind of, like, some of the stuff I've encountered when I've walked my dogs. You know, a lot of little kids, like, they see the dogs and they get excited. And, like, they're like, "Oh, doggy, doggy," you know. But then they're too scared to pet the dog. So, you know, I just, you know, try to show the little kids that, you know, the dogs are nice and they're not going to hurt them. And, you know, hopefully they'll get more used to animals. Although right now my kitten is biting me. I don't know if you can see this, but she's like biting my arm. Pumpkin, stop! But yeah, ow! As far as pet supplies go, because pets aren't as common out here, pet supplies are a little bit more expensive, which kind of sucks because I'm on a budget, so it kind of sucks having to, you know, pay more. Dog food isn't as bad. Like for a 4-pound bag of dog food, it's like 12 to 15 bucks. Which is still, I think, kind of expensive, but not too bad. But cat food, like for a 4-pound bag of cat food, it costs about $22 to $25. In the States, that's what you would pay for like a high-end, good quality cat food, you know, like grain-free, you know, this and that type of food. But out here, that's like the cheapo, like the crappy, filled with dyes and bad ingredients food costs like $22. It kind of sucks because, you know, I wanted to like buy some cheap cat food to feed the strays out here because there's a lot of stray cats out here, but you know, at $22 a bag, I just can't really afford that. Like cat litter is really expensive. Like I forgot to mention, like owning indoor cats isn't really common out here. Like most people do not have cats as a pet. You know, they'll be like, some people will feed like outdoor stray, like the old women will feed the strays and stuff, but a lot of people don't have indoor cats. Coconut, calm down. So yeah, like especially cat supplies are really expensive. Coconut, shh. Like cat litter, like for a small, like maybe 5-pound bag or 10-pound bag, I don't know. The cheapest I've ever seen is like 10 bucks. And like, it's funny because in California we have a brand called Cat's Pride. It's not like a terrible litter, but it is like one of the lower end, like cheaper litters. Like probably get like a 15-pound jug of it for like $5. Out here, I went to a pet store and it was the most expensive litter they had. It was even more expensive than the Arm & Hammer baking soda cat litter. It was like $25 for a 15-pound jug. So it's just kind of ridiculous how expensive cat food and cat litter is. Oh gosh, all my pets decide to start fighting as soon as I film this video. Like now, Harry and the kitten are like fighting. Harry's another cat I have. So yeah, pets aren't very common, but you know, I think they're becoming more common. So I think, excuse me, I think more and more people are starting to own pets. So I think the cost of pet supplies will go down in the future once, you know, as they become more and more popular. I feel like I'm forgetting something, but I can't think of what it is. But yeah, so I'll show you a couple pictures of my pets right after I'm done talking, and then I'm going to show some pictures of the dogs at the animal shelter so you can see kind of what it looks like at the animal shelter and the dogs there. Oh, guys! Sea bass, it's okay, sea bass. Everyone's fighting. Anyways, yeah, luckily though, most of the dogs at the shelter are really friendly. There's only a couple aggressive dogs at the shelter, but luckily all the dogs at the shelter are really nice. Much nicer than the dogs I've encountered, like just on the streets and stuff. But yeah, I think that's it. If you have any questions, I feel like I've forgotten stuff. But if you have any questions, leave a message below and I'll answer them. Hey guys, I remember what I forgot to mention. So a common question I hear people ask is, do they eat dog in Korea? And unfortunately, sometimes some people do eat dog. It's definitely not common. Like most people do not eat dog here. Like it's really uncommon, but it still happens. Unfortunately, like I'm a part of this animal rescue Facebook group, and a couple times people have posted where they've rescued either stolen, I don't, you know, think that's a good idea, but they either stole dogs from a dog meat farm, or they've bought, like paid for the dogs, or negotiated with the farmers, you know, and rescued dogs from dog meat farms. So it does still happen, but it tends to be the older people that eat it. Like most younger people have never eaten dog. It's the older people that you know, ate it as when they were younger, like back in the 50s or whatever, you know, and like they just grew up eating dogs, they're used to it. Kind of the same situation in Japan with whale meat. Like most younger people in Japan have never eaten whale meat, but you know, the older people, like back in like the 50s, I think 40s, 50s, something like that, whale meat was actually the cheapest meat. So you know, back, you know, Japan also had a Depression era, just like the United States. So back then, whale meat was the cheapest meat. So that's what they grew, you know, what they ate. And the older people, that's just what they're, you know, what they're used to eating. So, but yeah, so same thing as in Japan and Korea. Like the older people, like they're just used to eating that meat, and they don't see anything wrong with it, just because that's what they've always eaten. But it's just not that common. Like it's really rare, I think, and maybe only certain parts of Korea. Maybe I don't know much about it. Like I don't really know anyone that eats dog meat, although I think I did hear that there is a restaurant here in Andong that serves dog meat, but I've never been, so I can't really vouch for that. It's just what I've heard. So yeah, it does still happen, but it's not very common. Like from what I've read, excuse me, from what I've read online, like dog meat's still somewhat a big thing in China, or at least certain cities in China. I mean, China is obviously a huge place, so maybe not all of China, but there are certain cities in China where it's like a huge thing, and so it's not like Korea isn't anything like that, I don't think, but it does still occasionally happen, but not very common. Like most younger Koreans, I think, have never eaten dog meat, or if they have, maybe like one time, or like maybe someone forced them to eat it, like their parents or something. But yeah, so that's that question. So like I said earlier, if you have any other questions, you know, post them down below and I'll answer them. And okay, here's some pictures of my pets and the animal shelter dogs. Bye! Hope you enjoyed the video.
그녀에게 주는데도 받질 않으니 사랑을 좀 주세요. 사랑이 모자라요. 매일매일 자라는 사랑을 그녀에게 주는데도 받질 않으니